Welcome to the 𝐓𝐻𝐬 podcast, everyone. Today we're in London at Mars Wrigley offices here in Paddington, London, and we have Josh Clarkson with us, Global Lead Retail Media, Mars Wrigley. Josh, welcome to 𝐓𝐻𝐬.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you very much for hosting us in this brilliant office space, and thanks for the time. We're happy to have you. Today we're going to be talking about global e-commerce, retail media, recent move from United States to England, back home, and some other personal updates if you'd like to share with the audience. But other than that, what's trendy, what's cooking, and what's going on with the retail media? Could you kick us off with a quick bio and introduction about your current role?
Yeah, of course. So I currently lead global retail media on the media side for Mars Wrigley. I've been here about 4 months, so it's still fairly new.
Congrats.
Thank you. The interesting thing about what we're doing at Mars Wrigley is I sit on the media side, but we have a counterpart, or I have a counterpart, 𝐋𝐢𝐬𝐬, who sits on the e-commerce side.
Right.
So we're going at retail media from two different angles with the two biggest stakeholders within retail media from a Mars Wrigley perspective, e-commerce and media. So it's quite interesting. It's making sure that everyone has a seat at the table. Before that, I, as you say, was in the US. I used to work for Lindt at one of their subsidiaries, Russell Stover, based out of the Midwest, and it's a bit different to London, but I loved it.
How does it feel like to be home after several years back in the States?
Yeah, I mean, it's cloudy today, so
welcome to London.
Welcome to the British summertime. But no, it's really nice to be home. I recently got married, so I think my wife now is very happy that I'm not 3,000 miles away.
Of course. And we congratulate you for the marriage as well.
Thank
Hopefully
you.
Honeymoon will last quite a year.
I'm sure.
With the ongoing buzz about retail media, and of course it's integrating the commerce and the digital media investment, how do you see this current integration playing into the CPG brands in our industry, and how it's going to be impact the ongoing digital media investments and the commerce performance measurement? Where do you see it's going in the next couple of years?
I think it's exciting to look at where it's come from, first of all. If you go back 5 years, probably retail media was limited predominantly to Amazon, and maybe it was run by an Amazon account manager, then maybe a digital marketing manager, then maybe you get a small team. Now we're really at a point where it's fully cross-functional and we're working across shopper, media, e-commerce. And actually that provides two things. One, the ownership has changed and will continue to evolve. And two, the investment piece has begun to change. So
tell me about the investment piece. Yeah,
for sure. So obviously as more stakeholders have got more heavily involved, there is an opportunity for more people to support it, but they all have their own agendas, right? So the KPIs for someone working in media, very different to someone working in e-commerce. So actually how retail media is run by any CPG probably depends on who the lead stakeholders are, who's funding it. Despite what retailers think, there isn't an infinite pot of money, but maybe some money's coming from media, some's coming from trade, some's coming from shopper. So yeah, it's really how is the investment driving the engagement within a business from the different teams that are involved in retail media.
You touched upon one of the crucial challenges going on last 18 months, I gotta say. I heard it from many different CPGs. I'm sure you've been in this situation and conversation. My observation shows that most of the funding is being asked and moving from trade to shopper media and brand buckets. But it might be different from category to category. Where do you see the most fund shift is happening from? And where do you suggest CPGs to make it work in their best interest, in their most effective way? How should the distribution should be? If you have any recommendation, suggestion, I would love to hear that.
I think it depends on what CPGs are trying to get out of retail media.
Right.
If they're just trying to use it to drive conversion, then it probably is limited to that retail media and that retail media network. So it probably is going to come predominantly from trade.
Right.
But actually, if brands start involving retail media within their wider brand media strategy and planning, then there's an opportunity to provide funding and investment from the brand media side. And naturally, you can do a whole lot of more interesting stuff, both upper funnel on-site and then off-site as well.
That reminds me of a different question. I just came out with this one when you talk about the category and the campaign objectives. Where do you see RGM people, revenue people, and also trade, key account managers, VP of commerce, predominantly focusing on traditional trade? Do you see they're up to speed or educated enough about retail media potential when these budget discussions happening and make the brand teams, marketing teams' life easier? Or you think there is still ground to be covered to make the teams at the same level, to bring them to the same speed?
I think some brands and CPGs are nailing it. I know a few, some are not, just because it hasn't involved that integration. But actually, if you think about how the key account managers are going to want to get involved from their sales perspective, if you think about RGM, retail media provides a great opportunity to drive greater visibility and awareness of key products. Yes, there's brand building, but there's also key pack sizes. Some of those are going to be more profitable than others. So actually, there's a real opportunity to integrate both RGM and at a single account level, the sales team, to make sure that you're driving the agenda for that account, what that account wants to do, drive profitability, drive overall CPG business profitability. So yeah, I don't think it's there yet. I see a couple of great businesses doing it, but there's a lot more that can be done to integrate those teams as well.
And let's look at the other aspect of retail media. Yes, it's a great lever to grow commerce. It's a great lever to increase profitability if you're in the right category or if you're playing into the right retail media networks. But there's another big piece of puzzle which is related to the first-party data. And of course, not every retailer platform, not every marketplace is equal when it comes to providing this data. To our conversation yesterday, it depends on how you define first-party data from whose angle. Where do you see these relationships between retailer marketplaces and the brands in terms of first-party data collaboration? And do you think, is it mature enough to really make it a big piece of investment with the data clean rooms, with the audience building capabilities, or still in the early conversation, it's still in nascency?
No, I think, again, it depends on the category, depends on the retail media network. But actually, you've got a wealth for a brand, second-party data, the retailer's own data, that's starting to help us build a picture of what our consumers are doing, how they're shopping, what packs they're buying into with that retailer.
Right.
Actually, if you do have first-party data as a brand, whether it's from your D2C, maybe it's from a brand website, sweepstake, whatever you ran, there's a great opportunity to overlay that in a clean room and build an even more detailed picture of what your consumer is. You might think that because the retail media network says this shopper never buys pack A, or they never buy big packs, they never buy on-the-go packs, and then you overlay your D2C data and you realize that's all they buy, but just in the retailer they only buy impulsively or they only buy whatever. So yeah, I think the more data we can get from more different sources, put it through a clean room, make sure that it's anonymized and nicely sorted so that a brand can utilize it, it helps us build a better picture of the shopper that we're trying to target, and in turn makes it a better experience for the shopper because they're going to get something more targeted, more personalized, ultimately more relevant for them.
One observation I share, actually, I want to share with you and get your feedback about this. I think there's not enough data clean rooms provided by the retailers in the industry yet. Do you agree with this observation, number one? Number two, which retailers that you know of are preparing to announce or launching their data clean rooms that we don't know yet? If you have any insights, if you have any announcements coming in.
I think there's a couple of leaders in the clean room space. Fortunately, they also do other things. So they're integrated with retailers and with brands through other work they do, and they're upscaling their clean room businesses. I know that there's certain partnerships with both UK retailers, European retailers, US retailers around clean rooms. But I think it goes back to the point that we said a minute ago. Clean rooms really only work if you're trying to ingest data from multiple sources.
True.
Actually, if you're just using retailer data, you don't necessarily always need a clean room.
No.
You can just utilize it within the frame of their retail media network. However, if you do want to ingest it and use it separately as part of your brand media, then there's another opportunity for clean rooms. You just take the data, say no thank you to them running the media, you run it yourself, but you buy the data from them.
Okay, clean room is a growing topic, and hopefully we'll see more retailers, more RMNs providing their clean rooms. As you said, it's only meaningful and impactful if you bring multiple sources for the first-party data, and it requires D2C presence, that requires some really good digital promotion, digital customer audience, CDP presence, etc. But it brings another question, which I'm proponent strongly, that measurement of the investment on the retail media network and the transparency of the reporting. Because sometimes the retail media network or aggregating platform you invest your media budget is owned by your media agency. And in the US, we used to call it student grading their own homeworks. How do you see this evolving? Because I know this is another big pain point for the brands in the CPG especially. How do you see this evolving? Are retailers or RMNs cooperating with brands to ease this pain or answer these questions, to provide transparency? And as these measurement platforms are evolving fast enough to convince brands to invest heavily, to invest securely, or they have doubts in their investment and they sure making slow baby steps to increase the required retail media investment? Where do you see this going?
I think established brands already should have a way of measuring the efficacy of their brand media and of their shopper marketing. So it's really just about data. It's data, data, data. That's what you're buying when you invest in a retail media network. So make sure you ingest it. You stole from my notes students don't mark their own homework.
Really?
But it's true, right? Okay. You don't want your agency to check it. You don't want the retail media network. of course, yeah, it's great. It works wonderful. Please give us some more money. It's not quite that simple, but that is how it sometimes feels. And so actually, I think making sure you get the data, you ingest it into platforms that you already use to measure other types of media and marketing, right, and then make a comparison and look at it. Is it delivering against your campaign objectives? And how is it delivering versus other media that you might be running? So the data is the number one thing. The other thing actually is really partnering with the retailer and the retail media network, whether they're directly related or not, bringing them in very early to say, this is my campaign, or this is my objective, this is what I want to achieve. How do we look at this from a media standpoint? How do we look at this from a commercial standpoint? So that everyone is very clear about what the outcome should look like, what does great look like, so that when you come to the end and you're reviewing, if they're not showing you what great looks like, everyone knows that it wasn't a success or that it needs right, tweaking or optimizing. So that, I just say, bring everyone on board internally and externally very early on, so you know what good looks like.
I was going to intervene another hot topic about AI, but you made a really good point and you triggered my curiosity when you said about comparing your retail media investment performance with the other data sources or other data types. Can you give one example which works best for food and beverage? Because you worked in another food and beverage company, now you're another food and beverage giant. Can you give a good example for the audience? What is a good case study of comparing retail media performance supporting or complementary to another type of media?
Yeah,
digital.
I'll give you an agnostic one to be safe, but a lot of retail media networks offer social media as a tool to use with their data. Almost every brand is also running their own social media.
Right.
How can brands be clear that they're not targeting the same consumer, maybe not even targeting the same shopper or the same searches or the same audiences? How do brands know that they're not bidding themselves up across two different platforms and two different bidding structures? So actually, that's a really important one, is if you think about social media, making sure that you're not bidding yourself up across two different teams.
Right.
It goes back to what we said. You need that internal alignment. If you know that your internal social media team is running a big campaign on XYZ, maybe try and make sure that you're not competing with it through a retail media network that, yes, offers you more data, but probably also offers you more expensive CPMs.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, CPMs keep getting higher, CAC, all the other metrics are getting more and more expensive because platforms are getting mature and it's getting more competitive. So this is going to be crucial to bring down costs with the support of the media comparison, attribution, measurement, efficiency. And it requires some capabilities around artificial intelligence, I suppose, more than just performance platforms, more than the agency reporting. I see artificial intelligence being heavily used in most of digital content, creative assets generation, the content generation, etc. Of course, DSP, programmatic, it's a good part of it too. Where do you see AI being most effectively utilized when it comes to the retail media campaign planning or optimization? Do you see that it's still also already in the early conversations, or is there any good examples that you can share? Hey, X AI solution is really helping for any CPG to measure or optimize a retail media campaign. Do you see this is happening today?
So there are two main things on this. One, yes, there's definitely companies out there that will help you with optimizing content, heat mapping, propensity for purchase or intent. Those are really great for your content. But actually, I think you can take a step back and look at it more holistically. I think AI offers significant benefits to improve how retail media integrates with the digital shelf, because ultimately, without a good digital shelf, retail media falls flat, right?
Kudos for saying that. I'm a big proponent of the same argument.
For sure. So I always see the digital shelf as three main pillars. It's about your availability, it's about your visibility, and it's about your conversion or your content, right? So availability, first of all. Offsite in particular, it's still possible to serve ads on a retail media network for a product that's out of stock. That shouldn't happen. So AI actually could help you, even down to a local store level, understand what's the store availability. Do we want to serve this ad to this consumer based on their geolocation, based on their local store? Do we want to serve a different ad, either from the same brand, or actually, are we just going to serve them a competitor brand? That's the retail media network to decide. So there's availability piece. The visibility piece, I think, is really interesting because actually through AI, we'll start to be able to quickly make calculations on what placements or what campaigns are performing best and optimize our budgets accordingly. So actually, if a certain placement is converting massively or clicking through massively, actually maybe we should be channeling more funding towards that. But we don't want to make the decisions about that in real time. We want AI to help us.
Of course.
This is our part. How do we spend it best? And then lastly, you talked about content. The dynamic content is a really big piece because I think actually there's a huge opportunity. Maybe it's that you change the content based on a shopper's geolocation so that it features their favorite football team. American football, soccer, whatever.
Right.
But actually the content served is based on their location. It's trying to appeal to them. Maybe it changes the content because they have pets, don't have pets. They love hosting parties, they don't love hosting parties. They're foodies, they're not. You know, if you're a rug cleaner, for example, that's great for people that drink wine, also people that have pets. It's, you know, you can serve the ad that's curated with better content to the right consumer. So yeah, I think all across the three pillars of digital shelf, there's a huge opportunity for AI to optimize our retail media spend.
Thanks for bringing that up. And I'm glad to hear that we're all moving in the same direction. We talked about this at MedFest last week. Near real-time dynamic content optimization. That's the direction, yes, we want to go and we can go. But I don't see currently in place, I don't see any examples or any capabilities doing that. And I heard Amy Lanzi from Digital's Publicis also talked about this in one of her video interviews 3 weeks ago or so. She also mentioned that, okay, Publicis is building some capabilities towards near real-time content optimization, helping CPG brands working with them. But do you see any actual execution in the real world today, or is it just a direction we want to get in the coming months, coming years?
Of content optimization specifically, or more?
Dynamic content optimization.
No,
Let me give you one example. If Lucy from London checking her favorite gummy bear or candy snack, she might see a different thumbnail, while Ken, a retiree from Surrey or Guildford, he might see a different thumbnail for his stock pantry shopping for the same exact product. But I don't see it any retailer, any marketplaces today. Do you see this coming soon?
It does exist. It's already being run. I think probably you might not see it because you are one consumer. And so actually it's really hard for brands to share examples because unless they see them and they say, okay, Retail Media Network is targeting this, it goes back to the measurement piece actually, and making sure that as you run content through retail media networks, you're able to look at it and go, okay, what was served where, and was it actually served to that consumer? Or did we make all this content and actually we served one example? So it does exist, but I agree, there's a lot more openness that needs to happen to understand, are we truly improving the shopper experience for the shopper?
Okay, we'll see which retailer, which marketplace will be creating the biggest bang around this and make the announcement. Then we'll share it publicly as well. And then we're coming to the solutions. Can you name a couple of good AI solutions that can make a wave or that can make an impact for different CPGs?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to favor anyone in particular, but I know, for example, especially in the US, there's a lot of brands that are using Dragonfly AI to look at their content. I think that's a really interesting opportunity, using AI to look at what the heat mapping focus is, where is the consumer likely to consider. And I mean, if you just follow them on LinkedIn, it's really interesting. They'll put an example up, they'll put something else up, and they'll show you where people are looking. It's so true. I miss so many messages on packaging. I miss so many messages on a floor stand or something. So that's one example where I think it will help content shopper and brand marketers change the assets they use to make sure that they're really working for the consumer.
I love it. And I worked with them in the past. They're really cool. Now, in terms of strategy, let's go back to 10,000 feet view. Retail media in your overall commerce strategy. Of course, there are many multiple objectives, there are multiple use cases. You mentioned some of them earlier in one of the questions we discussed before. But if you had to choose top 3 commerce-driven objectives where retail media could play the leading role, what those tactical areas, what those strategical pinpoints would be for any digital e-commerce brand?
So if you want 3, I think retail media offers a huge opportunity for MPD.
Yeah.
If you're launching a new product, there's a great opportunity to use retail media all throughout the funnel to drive awareness of a new product. But actually also, if someone's already aware of your brand, you can use on-shelf search to drive them. If they're searching M&Ms, for example, but we want them to try our new M&Ms minis as an MPD, make sure that actually when they're searching for the brand that we're serving them with ads and content that showcases this great new MPD. Yep. So that's one, is MPD. The second is actually, we talked about RGM and profitability.
Yes.
Using retail media to drive more profitable packs, more appropriate packs. And then thirdly, do you know what? Whilst certain marketplaces do offer a semi-unlimited digital shelf, that's not the case for your Tesco's, your Walmart's, your Targets, you know. Outside of the marketplace realm, for their core products that they stock, and if you want it to be delivered or picked up from the store, they have a limited inventory. So actually it can be a great opportunity if you're a bit worried about a certain product and the run rate is a bit low, you can use retail media to get that back into the top 20% of products, because ultimately if it's on the top row or in the top 6, that's where consumers are going to be looking for that category product.
It's a great lever for this acceleration and elevation, and ROI is still one of the best, as long as you can measure it effectively.
Yes.
And this brings us back to another point you made 10-15 minutes ago about retailer collaboration, because you also pointed out that the brands need to collaborate more closely with the retailer or marketplace partners in order to make retail media deliver the real value for both sides. But it's easier said than done, because it's a very profitable business stream for the retailers right now. And I've seen some conversations going awry because it's lucrative for one side and it's still a challenge for the other. How do you see this collaboration piece coming live together? Do you think there's a balancing act happening, or do you see still CPGs are complaining about the walled gardens, retailers are monetizing their media and web space, and we're not getting what we're planning to get from the investments we make? Because I've heard these in a couple of the conversations that we both did, obviously. Do you think it's coming to a more natural balanced state, or what should be done to build these collaborations?
Brands probably need to consider what the conversations are that they're having with retail media networks. So is it a conversation around, you need to pay me this to get X, Y, and Z away? That's a very negative, non-negotiating, non-collaborative approach. Or is it that the brand and the retailer realize this is what we want to achieve this year, in the next 2 years, in the next 5 years, in the next 3 weeks? It doesn't matter the time frame. This is what it's going to cost us to get there because we need to invest in X, Y, Z. So it's shifting that mindset. And I think at the moment you see a lot of brands investing in a small number of retail media networks. I know Russ at Stratably did a load of work on this, and the DSI has done a load of work on this. Actually, brands are investing in 3 to 5 retail media networks because they're offering better measurement, they're showcasing what they're doing, and they're collaborating a bit more on what the brand wants to achieve. I think as more retail media networks start to do that, that'll be really important.
And I also see another trend across CPG brands. They're becoming picky and prioritizing certain retail media networks over others instead of going wild and investing 15 different retail media networks where they don't get the sizable enough return on the investment. So this is going to be also a big challenge for the retail media networks. With all this proliferation happening the last 2 years, yes, we have a tremendous number of RMNs, but I think there will be also a consolidation on that front too. That's what I'm expecting. And there is also another convergence happening between digital media and the traditional media. And we talked about the third wave, we talked about the retail media replacing linear TV in 2-3 years or so. How do you see the interaction of digital media and retail media in particular with the traditional media sources? Do you see retail media as a channel or retail media as a combining cement-like infrastructure, bringing different media sources together? Where do you see it's going to settle when the dust is gone?
I think I know my counterpart in the US hates me saying this, but I don't think my job will exist in 5 years' time, maybe even in 3 years' time, 2 years' time, who knows? I don't want to do myself out of a job. But if you go back 5-10 years, maybe we stood social media up as a separate channel, separate pillar. Now it's just part of the media mix, and it's just one of the levers you can pull.
Right.
Retail media will be exactly the same. It will fall into total media. It will be an opportunity to pull, and it will really depend on your campaign objectives, your brand objectives, your big bets for the year. So yeah, right now it's being put on a little bit of a pedestal. It's definitely a buzzword. Madfest, Cannes, everywhere. It was definitely the buzzword. But I think it's because it's new, and actually as brands, agencies, and retailers, we're all kind of learning together. And until it's better established and more standardized and an easier way to compare it to other media, once that happens, I think it will just fall into standard media.
I love the honesty and the transparency about the prospects of the role. I totally love it, and I agree.
Not putting myself out of a job, to be clear.
No, I agree with that too, because the role will definitely change. Scope of the role will definitely be different than what we know of today or what we're trying to achieve today in the 3 to 5 years. I agree with that as well. And this brings the human element of this conversation, because still we're navigating, exploring, learning, but there are many different roles working on the retail media overarching domain, be it from shopper marketing, being from digital media, agency counterparts, and you mentioned even commerce teams also involved in retail media conversations. So I want to talk about how you build the team structure, where the core functions are supporting the retail media investment for the account growth, JPB planning, media investment, return optimization. And another thing is, it's a very fast-moving area. How do you keep this multifunctional team motivated, learning, agile, not to left behind in this big way we're going through?
Yeah, so I think on the team structure, Obviously, from a global perspective, it depends on the local market.
Yeah.
Some market, we see it across, outside of my business, but overall, there's retail media roles popping up all over the place. But they're not always consistent, right? It depends on which team they sit in, how they're involved. I think the main thing for CPG brands is to think about, okay, who are the stakeholders? And who are your stakeholders as a brand? Not who are the retailer stakeholders for you as a brand. Because retailers seem to be folding a lot of traditional shopper marketing, floor wobblers, floor vinyls, stuff like that, into retail media. That's just putting a different name on something that's been well established for decades, right? So actually, what do you as a brand consider to be retail media? And then make sure the teams and the functions that are involved in that are always communicated with, involved. You start the planning earlier and earlier. It's very hard because it's evolving so quickly, but that's the main thing for me. So from my perspective, like you said, it's definitely shopper, it's definitely e-commerce, it's definitely the media team. Ultimately, it's the key account team, the sales team. There's a bit of RGM in there as well. It's a really cross-functional piece, but having them all involved. And then on the JBP side, it really depends. I don't think there's necessarily a right or wrong way to do this. You can either have a separate media JBP with the retail media network that pushes for your media and brand aims, and that will work all the way down the funnel. Or you try and fold it, especially with perhaps smaller retail media networks that don't have the team on their side, but it's more sat within the retailer.
Right.
You try and fold it into your wider JBP. Hey, if we're trying to achieve these commercial aims, this is how retail media might help us unlock that. So if we're going to commit to XYZ growth, then these are the things we also need to commit to, investing in this, delivering against these retail media buckets, whatever it is. So there's two different ways to look at it. I think both of them can work. It just depends on the CPG business, the retail media network, how the teams are structured. It's pretty complex, right?
Every company is different. Every organization has different setups. That's true. Then another improvisational question, which we didn't discuss in our prep. I wrote about this a couple months back because when you discussed about the team structure, that just reminded me this developing trend. I see the leading roles of the marketing towers and the sales towers are converging. And I wrote about this, I think it was P&G. They combined sales and marketing and they assigned one person leading that role. Also Mondelez, I know from my previous role. Martin Reno, hi from here. He was the chief marketing officer and now he's chief marketing and sales officer, and some of the team members, my colleagues, suddenly lined up under his tower. Do you see this also growing in more CPGs, more brands, because of this digital media impact in the overall commerce? Do you see also this convergence between marketing and sales teams, so the chief revenue responsibility is not heavily coming from the sales background leaders anymore, but marketing people have say in the commercial execution performance of the company as well? Do you see this trend, or just one of a couple of examples here and there?
I think there's a few examples. I would throw it back and say you can't sell product unless there's good availability, but I don't see any head of sales and supply chain. So actually, yes, there's opportunities to merge these things because they are related, but equally there's an opportunity to keep them slightly specialized, slightly separate, and just make sure that if there are silos, you're breaking them down. Communication is really high, collaboration is really high. I don't think it means you need to merge the functions. Great if certain businesses are doing it, but I think that there's always intricated parts of the business. It doesn't mean you merge everything, otherwise we'd have 7 CEOs of everything.
Okay, that's a good point. Now I want you to bring your either crystal ball, if you like, or Turkish coffee mug, okay? I want you to be a fortune teller. So if you had to pinpoint one or two upcoming trends that will really impact what we're doing today, what we're trying to learn and achieve, and the overall CPG digital commerce, what would you point our attention to? Hey guys, just be careful about this trend approaching and it will really impact our daily life. Please be our fortune teller.
So I think two things. One, we've already talked about, and we're not sure whether or not we're seeing it yet, is true dynamic content.
Yes.
That's going to be a huge change. One, it's a great opportunity for better targeting, more addressable content that's relevant for the shopper. But there's a huge demand on businesses to produce that. It's going to be really difficult to produce huge swathes of content. So we talked about whether AI can be involved, but ultimately whether it's AI, whether it's an agency, whether it's building your in-house team, there's a huge demand on resource there. So that's one thing to watch out for. The other thing is, we're talking about retail media as a buzzword right now. I predict in a couple of years we're going to just talk about it as transactional media, because if you look at what's happened with Chase, launching Chase Media, you've got United Airlines launching their own media group. More and more brands and businesses, not necessarily retailers, that have consumer data are realizing they can monetize that because it's better for the consumer and better for the shopper, because it allows brands to get closer, and because it's better for their P&L, right? So actually, I think we'll see this huge shift where actually right now, if I would partner with retailer X, I know what's going on in that retailer for my shoppers. If I partner with a banking company, I know what's that shopper is buying anywhere, irrelevant of the retail media network that I'm partnering with. If you're on United and you're a headphone customer, you know, a headphone brand, you can look at, okay, you're on a flight, maybe you're sat in economy and maybe it's a fully subscribed flight. Maybe I want to start selling you some noise cancelling headphones. Or maybe you make lots of trips, so maybe I want to sell you some new luggage. So actually there's a huge amount of data that's available. And I think we'll see retail media turning into transactional media very soon.
Thanks for 2 quick foreseeing recommendations: near real-time dynamic content supported or powered by AI, and the transactional media. We're going to be looking out for those trends coming before they hit us. Josh, now we're coming towards the end of the podcast. It was really dynamic and educative. Thank you very much. I learned a few good tidbits for myself. Thanks for the insights. And it was great for us to be here. That's a wrap.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you. Thanks for tuning in to 𝐷𝐸𝐿. And remember, with us, you got to stay ahead of the curve. And with Josh, we'll learn a lot of good tidbits today. And we're going to share all the videos and the podcast audio with you guys soon. See you soon.